I'm Tracy.
Last Thanksgiving, I sat at a table filled with family, the air thick with the smell of roasting turkey and the tension of unspoken words. My father, Henry, raised his glass in front of 16 family members and declared that I was the only one at the table who hadn't learned how to be an adult. I didn't react with anger. I didn't storm out. Instead, I picked up my fork, took a bite of the dry turkey, and calmly asked my brother-in-law, Ethan, a single question. His fork hit the china so hard that the gravy boat trembled, and a deafening silence fell over the room for 6 long seconds. What my father didn't know, what none of them at that table knew, was that for 3 weeks, I'd been carrying a piece of paper in my purse. It was a public record, something anyone could find if they knew where to look, and I'd spent hours uncovering the truth hidden within. Let me take you back to September. I lived in a small apartment on Elm Street, on the 3rd floor. The place was old, with a leaky faucet in the bathroom and a creaky floorboard near the door. But my kitchen window faced the park, and every morning, I'd watch the sun rise over the trees while sipping my coffee. I worked at a small accounting firm called Greenfield Accounting. My job was to go through financial records, looking for discrepancies, and ensuring that everything added up. It wasn't the most exciting job, but I was good at it, and my colleagues respected me for my attention to detail. My boyfriend, Leo, was an artist. He spent his days in his studio, creating beautiful paintings that seemed to come to life on the canvas. He was building me a bookshelf out of reclaimed wood he'd found at an old barn. He was patient, taking his time to measure and cut each piece precisely. I loved that about him. By most standards, I was doing well. I paid my bills on time, had a stable job, and a loving boyfriend. But in my father's eyes, I was a disappointment. My father, Henry, was a successful businessman. He'd built his own company from the ground up and was used to getting his way. He had a very clear idea of what it meant to be an adult, and in his mind, owning property was the ultimate sign of success. My sister, Lily, was his golden child. She and Ethan lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs. It had a big yard, a pool, and all the latest amenities. They had 2 kids, Ava, 9, and Lucas, 6, who were well, behaved, and polite. Sunday dinners at Lily's house were a regular occurrence. Lily would set the table with fine china and crystal glasses, and Ethan would make sure everyone had a drink in their hand. My father would sit at the head of the table, looking proud, and talk about how well Lily and Ethan were doing. I always felt like an outsider at these dinners. Lily would often make comments about my apartment, suggesting that I should find a better place to live. She'd say things like, "You should really think about buying a house, Tracy. It's time you settled down." One Sunday in September, I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter. The return address was from a bank. Lily saw me looking at it and quickly flipped it over. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I filed it away in the back of my mind. A few weeks later, I was going through some financial records at work when I came across something that made my heart stop. I found a record of a cash-out refinance for Lily and Ethan's house. The amount was $380,000, and it had been recorded just 2 months ago. I remembered that my father had given Lily $90,000 from the family trust our grandmother, Rose, had set up. He told me that she'd used it to pay off the mortgage on her house. But if she'd paid off the mortgage, why was she refinancing for such a large amount? I did some more digging. I found out that Ethan's business, a small construction company, had been struggling. They'd been losing money for months, and it seemed that they'd used the $90,000 from the trust to keep the business afloat, and then refinanced the house to get more money. I was shocked. My sister had lied to my father, and he'd given her money based on that lie. I didn't know what to do. I thought about telling my father, but I knew he'd never believe me over Lily. A few days later, my father called to tell me that this year, Thanksgiving would be at Lily's house. He said he had an important announcement to make, something about the future of the family and the house. I could tell from his tone that it was going to be about giving the family house to Lily. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew I couldn't just sit there and let it happen. I printed out the refinance record and put it in a plain white envelope. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just carried it around with me like a secret weapon. The night before Thanksgiving, Leo and I sat in his car outside my apartment. It was raining, and the sound of the drops hitting the windshield was soothing. I told him what I'd found out, and he just listened. He asked me what I was going to do, and I said, I don't know, but I can't just let them get away with it. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early. I made a salad just like Lily had asked me to. I put on my best clothes and packed the envelope in my purse. When we arrived at Lily's house, it was already filled with family. The house smelled wonderful, like cinnamon and roasted turkey. My father greeted me with a quick hug, more out of obligation than affection. Lily was all smiles, but I could see the tension in her eyes. We sat down to eat. The conversation was light at first, but then my father stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. He looked around the table and said, I've spent my life building this family and this business. And I'm proud to say that my daughter, Lily, has followed in my footsteps. She's paid off her house, built a wonderful family, and is a true success. He raised his glass and said, To Lily, the daughter, who's made me so proud. Everyone at the table raised their glasses, except for me. I sat there looking at my plate, thinking about what I was about to do. I took a deep breath and turned to Ethan. Ethan, I said, my voice calm, can you pass me the turkey? And while you're at it, how's that $380,000 refinance going? The room went completely silent. Ethan's fork clattered to the table, and Lily's face turned pale. My father looked at me, confused. I took the envelope out of my purse and said, This is a public record of the cash-out refinance on your house, Lily. You told Dad you paid off the mortgage, but you used the $90,000 from the trust to save your failing business, and then you refinanced for even more money. My father's face went through a series of emotions, shock, disbelief, and then anger. He looked at Lily and Ethan, waiting for an explanation. Lily stood up, her voice high, pitched, and defensive. This is just a misunderstanding, Tracy. You're trying to cause trouble. But Ethan hung his head and nodded. It's true, Dad. The business was in trouble, and we needed the money. We thought we could turn it around, but we couldn't. My father sat down, looking defeated. My grandmother, Rose, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table, spoke up. Henry, that $90,000 was from my trust, meant for both Tracy and Lily. You had no right to give it all to one of them based on a lie. My father didn't say a word. He just sat there looking at his hands. I stood up and said, Dad, I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I just want the truth to come out. I'm done being the scapegoat at this table. I picked up my purse and walked out of the house. Leo followed me. Outside, the cold November air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Rose. She invited me to her house for tea. When I got there, my father was already there. Rose sat us down and said, I've called my lawyer. I'm revoking Henry as the trustee of the trust. I'll be appointing an independent trustee to manage what's left. My father looked at me and said, You could have told me privately, Tracy. I said, You could have asked me how I was doing before judging me, Dad. He nodded, a small, almost imperceptible nod. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to change. Lily sent me a text saying she was sorry I found out the way I did, but she didn't really apologize for lying. Ethan called to say he wished he'd been more honest. My father called me once, and he said, You're a lot like your grandmother. I should have seen that before. Leo finished the bookshelf, and I filled it with my favorite books. Copper, my cat, made himself at home on the top shelf. This Christmas, we had dinner at Rose's house. It was a small gathering, just Rose, Leo, my aunt, and me. There were no big announcements, no toasts. We just enjoyed each other's company. I used to think that belonging meant being accepted by my family, but now I know that it means standing up for what's right, even if it means causing a little discomfort. And I'm okay with that.